We're back with the Wall Street Shuffle, folks. Dan Cofall here, 877-777-7713. I'm joined with Bill Ayers, and many of you think you know who Bill Ayers is, but hopefully by the end of this interview, in 8.5 minutes from now, you'll know more about who Bill Ayers is or is not. He is a distinguished professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago, College of Education, author of many, many books, not the least of which are his memoirs called Fugitive Days. Bill, again, thanks for doing the show with us. We appreciate you coming on and giving your opinions. Let's go back and revisit the distinction between criminal acts of street gangs, Chicago, border wars, they're all the same, horrific acts, and acts of international terrorism. Let me let you go back and finish your thought on that.
Well, my thought really is this. I go to the United Nations or I go to the U.S. Senate, and I want a stable definition of terrorism. And a stable definition of terrorism says that any act that massively attacks civilians, any act that targets for assassination or kidnapping or targets non-combatants in order to work someone's political will, that is an act of terrorism. So terrorism can be an act by a government, by a sect, by a religious order, by a group of nuts, by a left-wing or a right-wing organization. But I wouldn't call the street gangs in Chicago terrorists. They are criminals, and they should be treated as criminals. The act that was visited on the United States in 9/11 was an act of terror, but you can't declare war on a tactic. And certainly you can't declare war on a tactic and then go ahead and use that tactic against civilians, and that's exactly what's happened. So I want to say that when Hamas lobs rockets into Israel, those are acts of terror. And when Israel blows up United Nations schools, those are acts of terror as well.
What would you have done if you were Israel? And the simple example I give is that I live in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I live in Dallas. And if Fort Worth lobbed a missile at Dallas, I would expect Dallas to lob 400 missiles back at Fort Worth. Do you agree with disproportional response in a war such as Israel and Gaza and the war in Gaza?
The problem, of course, is so more tangled than you and I are going to be able to untangle right here. But I would say this, that what we need to do, and what I heard echoes of in the speech this morning by President Obama, is we need to decide whether the way forward is a way based on war, violence, and military power, or whether it's based on learning to talk to one another, learning to negotiate, learning to live side by side as nations among nations. Gaza has been an isolated, terribly oppressed, and immiserated small little strip of land. It's true that what they were doing, the people who were lobbing rockets into Israel were doing something that was not only illegal but acts of terror. That's true. But now we look at the aftermath of what just happened, and we see 1,500 Palestinians dead, and we see women and children and massive destruction. Where do we go from here? If we don't recognize the humanity of both Palestinians and Israelis, there is no way forward.
But isn't the primary responsibility of all government, whether it's American government, Israeli government, Palestinian government, isn't it to protect its people? And if Israelis are being killed, even one Israeli is killed, isn't a disproportionate and immediate response expected by the government to protect its people?
I don't think you can say that a disproportionate response is necessary. Look, it's true that these rockets were horrible. It's also true that Israel and the United States got Hamas into power. I mean, it's madness in a certain way. It's an Alice in Wonderland world. The United States and Israel refused to deal with Fatah. They said, no, these people are illegitimate. They're terrorists. Let us have an election. They had an election. Hamas was elected. So here we are loving democracy, except that we label Hamas a terrorist organization that we can't talk to. This is, as I say, an incredibly upside-down catch-22 world. There's no peace at the end of that. What we need to do is interrupt the violence and say, we recognize the humanity of all. Let's listen. Let's speak. Let's possibly find a way to find a common ground. I have a lot of hope that if the American people could, drive for that, I think this administration could represent that new turn in foreign policy. In other words, a foreign policy not based on violence and invasion and control, but a foreign policy based on justice and recognition.
Since you brought up the new administration and President Obama, let me ask you very quickly. The media said that you have a close relationship with President Obama. You've denied that you have a close relationship, and this isn't a gotcha question. I'm just curious. What is the relationship that you have with President Obama?
Well, President Obama and I, a few years ago, shared a boardroom. We were on the board of a small foundation in Chicago that gave grants to alleviate poverty. We were on a board together to support school reform in these urban schools. We were neighbors. We saw one another in the neighborhood. As he said, I was a guy around the neighborhood. As I've often said, he too was a guy around the neighborhood. And, you see guys around the neighborhood, and you don't make much of it. Now, today, of course, if I saw President Obama, I'd make a big red letter entry into my diary. But at the time, we lived 2 blocks apart, and we would see each other now and then. The dishonesty of the McCain-Palin narrative was to say that if we shared a boardroom or a bus ride or a cup of coffee, that somehow that indicated we were responsible for one another's politics, policies, histories, and so on. That's a false narrative, and I reject it out of hand. Even worse than that was the implication that some Americans are real Americans, true Americans, and some, like me, are somehow not real Americans and should be pushed out of body politic. I disagree. Americans are various. We are complicated. We are diverse, and I am one. So I would say my relationship with Obama was like the relationship he had with thousands and thousands of other people. And like millions of other people, I wish I knew him much better today.
Well, Bill, I have to tell you that whether you and I have the same political persuasion or not, I do think that certain characterizations in the media are grossly unfair. And I know that I've served on boards before, and I've worked with people before that I wouldn't choose as my friends. So the question was a very straightforward question because
I appreciate that.
Again, whether I'm a conservative or a liberal, I think it's fair for everybody to be able to express their opinion and let people make their calls. All I hear is negative comments about Bill Ayers. I don't know if you're a good guy or a bad guy, but I do know what I hear seems biased.
I'm not even going to defend my good guyness or bad guyness. I would simply say there should be no political litmus test for you and I having a conversation. I didn't check you out. You didn't really check me out. We're having a talk. That's what democracy is built on. So there's no reason at all that a person running for political office shouldn't talk to all Americans, get the diversity of opinions and so on, and retain a mind of your own. If Obama has anything, it's a big mind and a mind of his own and a calm disposition. I have a lot of hope that he'll find new ways to look at old problems.
Bill, we've got a little less than 3 minutes before we end this segment. I know you have very high hopes for the Obama administration, and I know that America does. Again, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you hope a new president does well. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I know probably that you didn't favor the policies of the Bush administration in general. Is there anything the Obama administration could do to lose your support? In other words, what would they do to not meet your expectations?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think that one of the things that, I thought that the speech this morning looked in 2 directions. One was a kind of a notion of a return to past glory, and the other direction was a new awakening of peace and justice. I worry deeply that this administration, like administrations in the past, could ruin itself in the furnaces of war. And that's what this moment is about. Will we be ruined in the pursuit of war, or can we hammer swords into plowshares and make a foreign policy based on justice? Can we learn to really live by the principle that anyone's suffering diminishes us all? Obama spoke in both directions, and as I say, if we continue to be a warlike nation, it won't just lose my support, it will ruin his presidency.
I frankly expected to see you at the inauguration today. Is there a reason that you chose not to attend?
I teach. I have a job, and I have to. My students depend on me, so no, I'll be in my classroom. I was in Grant Park the night of the election, of course, and I was absolutely joyous. But I watched part of the inauguration with my students this morning, and I will teach another class tonight. But I couldn't get to D.C., or I would have had to cancel class. I never canceled class.
It's a curse we all share, is having
exactly.
a job, and
exactly, a job can ruin your whole day.
You've got about a minute left here. First of all, I want to let people know how they can reach you and learn more about you, but also take the next 30 seconds or so and feel free to tell everybody that's listening something that you want them to know about you that is either correct or incorrect. Who is Bill Ayers, and what do you want to tell people?
Well, I spend most of my time worrying about education. I really see education as the great humanizing possibility, and I am an educator. I've been an educator since I was about 20 years old, and what I really hope we can do in this period is redefine what it means to be an educated person and really think about civic education, education for social justice, participatory education for citizenship, and that's what I work on all the time.
How can somebody reach out if they want to learn more about you, Bill?
Well, I have a website, billayers.org, but anyone can email me at bayers, B-A-Y-E-R-S, at uic.edu. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Thanks so much.
Well, we appreciate you coming on because it's always fair for people to express their opinions. Again, we don't have to agree or disagree, but facts are important, and we appreciate you giving us your opinion. Thanks for coming on the show. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, folks. Stay with us tomorrow, 23 short, more hours, and we'll be back with more interviews. Maybe none quite so interesting as the last one, but we'll try to keep up the pace for you. Stay with us. We'll be back tomorrow, folks, 23 hours here on the Wall Street Shuffle.